The United States men's national team concluded their games in the international window emphatically, where they not only beat Costa Rica, they shredded them 4-0 in Salt Lake City. The United States looking much better than when they came in. This is the Soccer OG. We are back from Denver. Thank you for everyone who made my YouTube video and my Soccer OG podcast the best performers under the Soccer OG window since its inception. Please subscribe right there, or I won't. I'm going to keep making that noise. That's the official Soccer OG noise for subscriptions. Please subscribe, and thank you for all those who joined the family. Soccer OG is like Bitcoin. Get in early, you will reap the benefits. Get in late, it'll still be good, but you won't be as rich. You'll still feel that value, certainly. And the Soccer OG podcast, there's a new one out right now where I'm joined with Taylor Twellman, my friend from ESPN, and we're going to do a full Euros preview, a tournament that is very near and dear to me. In the early days at Fox, I remember when I first became let's go further back, when I first became a soccer fan and I caught ear of this Denmark team in 1992. Yeah, I'm old. I'm the OG. And that's when I started to fall in love, certainly with that competition, with the sport. Because prior to that, all I did was watch World Cups and some Liga MX, because it was always on. And then the Greeks, who won it in 2004, the biggest shocker in international competition, in my estimation. I think most would agree. So many great stories, and we will get into that, and that begins on Friday. So subscribe, listen to the podcast, and let's move forward with the U.S. effort. So the United States making several changes, beating Costa Rica without Christian Pulisic and Weston McKennie, who didn't get off the bench, without Sergiño Dest, without Zach Steffen, who was injured, Matt Miazga, who was getting married. So the roster was thinned out a bit, opportunity was opened up, and this group of players did not miss a beat. They were spectacular, playing a vertical game. They were very effective. They got first-time goals from Brendan Aronson and Reggie Cannon and Daryl Dike. Daryl Dike looking great at the top as another option. He finally got a game. That is huge. The off-ball movement was tremendous. Just work rate overall from the U.S. was something to really admire, and Costa Rica looked worn out. The U.S. continued to apply the pressure. And the one guy who really comes away from all of this as the big winner is Brendan Aronson. And I've said this before, and this is not a unique view. I think a lot of people based on Twitter agree with me. He scored the goal. Then he also had that incredible play, if you saw it, where he snaked in off the byline and almost scored a second time. He is one of our 6th, 7th, or 8th best player, according to my calculations. So you got to have him in the starting 11 somehow. Where do you put him? Do you bring him up the top? Do you play him as a false nine and replace Josh Sargent? Do you push him on the flank? Maybe bring in a Christian Pulisic as a false nine? Do you drop a Pulisic or a Reina to the midfield and Aronson gets a spot there? You've got to find minutes for him, specifically starting minutes. Everyone says super sub. But the reason he's more than a sub is because his effort from 0 to 90 is the best on any player on the U.S. team. He's running and running and running. That gets compromised a bit if you play him for 30 minutes. The beauty of this guy is he's pressing and pressing, and he doesn't stop. He's like Rocky Balboa. Dated reference. Again, I'm the OG. And that's something I think you can really benefit from 90 minutes. You just got to find a spot for him. I'm convinced of it now. I've seen more than enough. Remember, he also torched the Austrian league in the short time he's been there. He is hitting every threshold and marker along the way. We mentioned the first-time goal scores. That's obviously huge for those guys individually. Penalty at the end, Gio Reyna took. He became the youngest player to convert a penalty for the U.S. men's national team. So history was made left and right from this U.S. team. Greg Berhalter has managed things very well, and he was able to get an alternate 11. Like I said, they hit every spot. Let's go through it a bit, and there's a couple players. Let's start with the guys whose stock is falling a little bit. Yunus Musa, everyone was screaming for him to be in the starting 11 for the U.S. He got a start here. He played fine, but you can see he misses some connections. He's a teenager. Not everyone's going to be like Gio Reyna, who is just pret-a-porter, ready to go in this game. Obviously, coming from a family of professional footballers helps a long way too, and he saw it growing up with his dad playing at Rangers and Manchester City, etc. He has a head start. Yunus Musa's still ahead of the curve. However, I think there's no need to rush him here, especially with the alternatives. You don't put Yunus Musa, I don't care what position you play, you don't put him ahead of Brendan Aronson for starters. Yunus Musa is going to be maybe that super sub. I think he fits that role a little better. People were screaming for him to play in the Honduras game and the Switzerland game. He's fine where he is. Let that percolate and grow. The fullback situation, Reggie Cannon scored a goal, was fantastic. He had this intercept. Tyler Adams back in the starting 11. He was superb, chasing guys down. He was a menace. He was scaring people out there. And even he was able to dislodge the ball, or not dislodge it, force the bad pass. Cannon comes in, steps in, and scores. So Tyler Adams is tremendous, but he kind of falls in that category for Christian Pulisic. You cannot rely on him 100% because of the injuries. You can't. You've got to have a backup plan for both those guys. Brendan Aronson's the backup plan for Christian Pulisic. Who is it for Tyler Adams? Because there is a big drop-off in that position. You've got to find it. Or maybe you bring back Michael Bradley. I don't know. You need someone who can kind of fill that role. It doesn't really fall into place with this younger U.S. team, but you've got to have someone who can do that. Other guy whose stock is falling a bit, Serginho Dest. He came out early in the Mexico game. He didn't play in this game. And the U.S., again, this a different opponent. Costa Rica didn't feel their best team, but this is still a very good team, and most of their key players came in at some point, and they wore them out. The U.S. wore them out. Both these teams have had the same commitment playing in Denver and then here in Salt Lake City. The U.S. were able to wear them out. Serginho Dest looks like a player without a proper position. He's great going forward, but you need someone who can defend. Anthony Robinson, Reggie Cannon, they are fully indoctrinated fullbacks. Serginho Dest, I worry that you may not find a place where he can be effective. As a left back, a right back, you're still worried about the space behind him. That's forcing other players to kind of fill a gap. It's been very scary watching him defend. And for a guy who starts at Barcelona, could it be feasible that he doesn't start for the U.S. men's national team? Don't rule against it. I hope he can, because he's such an incredible weapon. But his stock certainly took a hit here. The U.S. team as overall stock rises because, as I said, Costa Rica got worn out. The reason they played these 4 games in this stretch is they're trying to mimic World Cup qualifying when it begins in September, and there's like 3 games per window, and you need different guys. You need depth. You need fitness to be a big role. And the U.S. has that in bushels, certainly in comparison to the other teams like Costa Rica, Honduras, Jamaica, possibly Canada, possibly Panama. They have that beat down. So the new qualifying setup seems to benefit the U.S., and we saw it in living color how Costa Rica was playing slow and the U.S. was flying, as we said. So I think Greg Bartlett's going to be really pleased with what he can take away from this experience. The U.S. are fast, fit, and deep. Daryl Dike certainly puts his hand up to compete for that number 9 shirt. It's going to be an interesting competition. Josh Sargent's still the man to beat, and he plays very well. But, I mean, Daryl Dike comes, and he should have had like 2, maybe 3 goals. He was near the play every time. And I can't compare this to a game versus a trophy versus Mexico with nothing on hand with a Costa Rica team that was ready to call it a day. But the U.S. showed, really laid down a marker for the CONCACAF teams. They beat Honduras, they beat Mexico, they beat Costa Rica, arguably the 3 biggest teams in the region. That's why they're in the Nations League. The United States have now won 11 of 13. You know, one of those was the loss to Switzerland that they didn't win. Can you name the other one? Wales. Wales forever. Wales forever. We'll support you. Sorry, the rugby player coming out a little bit. We tied Wales. And you'd like to do better against the European teams, lost to Switzerland, tied Wales, beat Northern Ireland, but you're not going to be facing European teams. You want to do well against CONCACAF because that's what you have in the Gold Cup. That's what you have in World Cup qualifying. Another big winner in this is the Mountain Time Zone. As you know, the United States are always looking for a place to field their games. If you play a CONCACAF team in LA or Texas, there's a good chance that your opponent might have more fans or as many fans as you do. You got to find a place where you put your team in the best position to win, where you have the most fans. Clearly, Denver and Salt Lake are places where they will have that. They are fit and their cardio is good. So at altitude, it benefits the U.S. U.S. soccer knows this already. That's why these games were there. And I think that's where we'll continue to see them being played because it works. This team likes the altitude. Certainly better than their opponents. 7 goals in their last 2 games in Denver and Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City crowd's got to be a little more fired up. They're there, but some of their chanting was, eh. But for Denver, that was, for me, the first real time I have seen since the pandemic had ended or since the pandemic had started. The first time I had seen a fan base will their team to victory. For all these games in empty stadiums, I've never seen this where the players really fed off the crowd. That may be the first time. Hopefully not the last. So there you have it. I think I covered it. We're going to come up this weekend with a breakdown on what to expect moving forward for the U.S. And we'll talk a little bit about the Euros, but we'll get you ready for the summer and World Cup qualifying here on the Soccer OG. Subscribe. This is your last warning. Check out the podcast. We'll see you on the weekend.